all of these things that most people that don't know what the life is like of a public housing tenant, could not sit around and say, well, you put a playground here, you put a nice sculpture there, and this is going to make people live there. And I think our experience, essentially at Pruitt-Igoe, was not going in with the idea that we had the answer. One of the things we put on our request for proposal when we submitted was that we don't know what the answer is, but we would like to approach the problem this way. And the approach was simply to collect on a design team people that were involved with all of these different phases of life. We had planners, we had sociologists, we had an anthropologist, we had a developer, we had architects, landscape architects. All of the things that you would say you would need in a community, we tried to collect them in the group of people, and all of them with the idea shared, similar to ours, is that let's study the problem and see what we can do. Now with that, I'd like to start the slides, and I don't mind your asking questions. In fact, it makes my life a little easier if you did. But if you would prefer to wait until the slides are over, and before we get the movie together, if you have some questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them for you. The design team. The man on the extreme left is Eldridge Lovelace from Harlan Bartholomew's and Associates. They're planners, landscape architects. I suppose they've done more plans for cities than any other group in the country. Next to him is one of his associates in the middle. On the right of the left slide is Mort Hoffman, also in the right slide on the left, and Eldridge Lovelace again. Mort Hoffman is an economist, and his problem was to come up with ideas that would, what is feasible in that particular area. Now, one of the reasons we selected Mort was because he had done some work on the DeSoto car area, which was a model cities area adjacent to Pruitt-Igoe. This is the photographs were taken in Clayton. If you're not familiar with the St. Louis area, Clayton is a fancy suburb. And of course, Eldridge Lovelace and his group, Harlan Bartholomew and Associates, were the original landscape architects at Pruitt-Igoe. Again, on the left, Eldridge and his associates, we have George Bradford, who is from the UDDG, an urban development group in Detroit, and next to him was one of his associates, Mr. Ewing. Bob Hutchins from our office, SON, and Mort Hoffman's assistant, Liz Mosier, is the lady in the photograph. We also associated ourselves with some local architects and engineers. The man in the blue suit is Charles Fleming of Jenkins and Fleming's, an architectural firm in St. Louis, who's been doing some remedial work or repair work on some of the housing projects in St. Louis. He also worked with the group that made a previous study on Pruitt-Igoe, suggesting that, ending up with the suggestion that you tear it down and rebuild it. And to his right, on the right of the right slide, is Mr. Barazzini from Rawson Barazzini. They were engineers, and they were doing the mechanical systems for the public housing in St. Louis. Here we're putting together our show our proposal to present to the task force that we were responsible to. This task force was made up of tenant representatives from Pruitt-Igoe, the mayor's executive secretary, Mr. A.J. Wilson, leaders from the churches in the community, representative, the director of the housing authority, Mr. Costello, representative from HUD, the local regional director, Elmer Smith. And I'm sure I'm leaving out some of these names, but I just would like to give you this as background. Here is Charles Duster from our office working on the panels for the presentation. And this is one of the meetings that, of course, you recognize Walter Nutch there. At every Monday, we would have a progress meeting. This happened to be the very last meeting that we had with them before we turned over our project to them for consideration. Here, all of the work, the culmination of the nearly a year's time that we had done in Pruitt-Igoe was all summarized on these charts and the model that you see before you. Now, on the left, the dark shaded area is Pruitt-Igoe. Now, these were 33 11-story buildings. Now, if you look at the surrounding area, they were all single-family houses, 2 or 3 stories high. Now, some critics have said that the reason Pruitt-Igoe failed was because they were high-rise buildings. This we did not agree. We think that high-rise buildings in an urban situation are reasonable, and 11 stories certainly was not that overpowering. Now, the density of them, we will agree that we feel that that is a dense part of humanity, as you see on that map. On the right, by the time we started working there, only the black buildings were occupied. There were some 10 buildings, 10 buildings, and the rest of them were unoccupied, boarded up, you will see later. Now, as I said, because there was abandonment in some of the buildings, and after it goes through 1 or 2 years of unheated, you can realize that there is a problem. So the consolidation of the tenants into these buildings was done for an economic move, and that was not to have boilers going and all of them to cut the water off. And again, this created a problem because people moved into the abandoned buildings after people were legally moved out. So they had to go back in and board them all up, at least with steel plate. Now, again, on the left, if you look at that, you would find that that looks no worse than any public housing you find anywhere in the country. On the right, you can begin to see as you move in closer, however, even though there are playgrounds and things, you can see that they're not used and there's mud instead of grass. And you can see in the windows, some of them that are boarded up. These were these Passover floors that Yamasaki and group had so cleverly worked out. Again, on the left, there are some buildings that are abandoned, and you see the rust color at the bottom of the buildings on the left are steel plates that have been welded to the frame to keep people out. On the right are just some students going to school. Within the actual borders of the project was, on the left, St. Stanislav, which was originally a Polish parish. It's still a Catholic church. On the left is St. Bridget. So you can see that the community has always been diverse. You know, it wasn't that when the blacks moved in, but before there was the Irish and the Polish that were living in this area to start off with. Their edifices remain, as in most public housing throughout the country. The churches, they never tear down unless they're course, storefronts. And on the right, we call this sprucing up the Virgin. When we first visited Pruitt-Igoe, we noticed that there were a lot of people around doing nothing, yet the church, there was kids out there actually scraping and painting the Virgin, and we felt that if that same kind of attitude were taken, perhaps we could learn a lesson that suppose you could spruce up your own building, and suppose you did it with the same fever that you spruced up the Virgin. And we felt that there was a lesson there, and perhaps we should try to follow that through. This is kind of showing you how the kids would play in the street rather than in the playground. And the streets were straight shots because, if you remember, the buildings were all lined up like soldiers. On the right is an abandoned building, and you can kind of see what happened to it. Some of the surrounding area. And it was because of what you see on the left that the land was cleared for public housing to start with. But instead of the public housing being a part of the community to help redevelop that community, the community around it continued to fall off. And that you see the kinds of things on the left. On the right, as you find almost in any city, Kentucky Fried Chicken, an old bank building, the things that really make the community go. Now, it's not that all of St. Louis is this way. We're only a few blocks from Pruitt-Igoe, and of course this area has gone, the residents of the area have really made an effort to preserve the community, and with this same fever as sprucing up the Virgin. This is Laclede town, which is hardly a mile away from Pruitt-Igoe. These were all little townhouses built by Clotilde Smith, and the little community had little stores built in, as you see on the right photograph. The quaintness of the buildings and all. Actually, Pruitt-Igoe was much better built than this, much better, more durable materials were than this. But somehow this became successful. Pruitt-Igoe did not. But they have very good tenant management. They also screen their tenants. And they have a feeling of community, not because the houses are different. You can look at houses built the very same as almost in any older city where you find a stable neighborhood. There might be two different houses and two different designs in an entire block. Back to Pruitt-Igoe, from any direction, all you see is blight. And the kids themselves, tried to uphold this kind of idea that, maybe a new day is coming. When we went inside of the buildings, we found, that there was vandalism, and of course it's always been reported that the tenants were doing all the vandalizing, but public housing, the housing authority themselves did a bit of cannibalization here to take out usable things to put in the other public housing that was not in the same trouble as Pruitt-Igoe. And our inspection around the place, on the left, is in a building that had won an award. They tried all kinds of things to generate this interest. This building won an award because they kept the cleanest lobby and the tenants were not penalized for various things or what have you. We decided that we should open up office right on site. That we felt that rather than working out in Clayton in that nice suburb I told you about, a rented space in downtown St. Louis, we decided that perhaps we should try it right on site. Now this kind of shook up a lot of people, not so much the design team, but other people that were concerned. The mayor was wondering how he could afford us safety if we actually moved into the area to work. On the left is the model cities area, showing Pruitt-Igoe right in the middle, and some of those photographs that I showed you of the surrounding area is what you find in that particular area. On the right, we see that these communities, this model cities area is broken down into about 5 communities, and all of them are within a stone's throw of Saarinen beautiful arch. arches on the left, this urban composition, which is a very interesting thing about St. Louis, that not so much that it was our revelation. I'm sure that anyone that understands the census and statistics could come to the same conclusion. But if we look at 1910, about the turn of the century, and if we looked at 1972, when we were in Pruitt-Igoe, we can see that the Central City population was exactly the same. There was a peak during the war years, say around the late 40s and 50s, and there was this massive rush to the suburbs, as shown by the light Simpson line. The area is growing off to nearly 2 million in the St. Louis metropolitan area. But St. Louis itself, the population has dropped down to about 650,000 people. Now, if you also notice that the very low bar of foreign-born, you can see that that remains almost the same. There was a growth during the war years and it's tapered down again. But look at the native black. The native black is a continuous rise. Now, we had to go through this exercise because we were confronted with someone saying that we were reversing this whole thing that public housing was trying to do about integration and this sort of thing. Our idea was that Pruitt-Igoe, you should not worry about integration. You should worry about doing good housing, and people themselves take care of it. Now, why should we worry about integration when you see what's happening there as a choice? Who needs the housing in the city? So now, whatever you call it, we really felt very strongly about that. And strongly because no matter what the community was, it was the people in the area that was of need. And this we learned very shortly by living in Pruitt-Igoe. But now, if we extend the native black and the central city population, we can see by 1980 or 1982, they're going to meet somewhere around 450,000 people. Now that means that all of St. Louis will be black. So now how could we sit there and talk about the problems of integration when it's very obvious what's happening to the city? Now, St. Louis may be strongly peculiar this way, but I think if you notice most larger metropolitan areas the country over, you will find similar things happening. Now, on the right, again, there's always, I was speaking to Mr. Costello a little earlier about highways and what they do to a community. And the first thing we had to do, you see Pruitt-Igoe right in the center with the long rows of buildings. Of course, there was this plan to run a superhighway right through it. And of course, we fought with the traffic people, the state, the local people, the mayor's office, and trying to reroute that. But it was no need for it. There was really no need to carry that lane through Pruitt-Igoe. Well, we succeeded in having them say that they would branch this off and agree to this in principle with us. Now, again, to give you some relationship with Pruitt-Igoe and, you know, the new sports arena downtown and Sarenan's Arch are all within sight of Pruitt-Igoe. Now, to run through these briefly, just as backup, we had to see where were people employed, and we began to see that from Pruitt-Igoe, more people were working outside of the city than they were inside the city. And if we looked at the activities going on, there were model cities was trying very desperately to build new buildings, and these new buildings were being caught up as soon as they built. And what they were building was not necessarily what you'd say is anyone's American dream. We went into this thing about the rent schedules and where people are living. On the left gives you an idea of income and what people are paying for the rent. On the right gives you a real sharp dichotomy of the racial complex of St. Louis. Again, to reinforce these numbers again, about 1950, 60, 72, and 73, of how the areas were growing and what that meant again, we re-emphasize that because it's very important that by 1972, in the model cities area, in that area we've been talking about, from 1950 to 1972, it dropped some 50,000 people. Now, we went through all of these things that you're accustomed to read about. The first thing you do is start looking at what's around and what's needed. And we found very interesting things in Pruitt-Igoe that between ages 0 and 62, you can just see. Well, did that wake up anybody? I can hang this around like that. I think a very interesting thing is that we find that the bulk of the population is somewhere between 0 and 13 years of age. And that group of people are going to be producing, families. And it won't be, 13 years later. And I think our real concern then became what is the makeup and what would be the requirements of spaces. Now, I mean spaces, I mean numbers of bedrooms and that sort of thing. I don't mean these architectural spaces between buildings and what have you. And then drop down most of them. We found that there were 177 that had males as the head of the household and 572 as females of the household. We had an idea of what the market is. Neil. So now the idea then became not so much to try to build a marketable house, but how can you do something to that community that would give people an opportunity to own houses or to rent houses or space that would be for their particular needs. Now again, this whole area, when we tried to relocate the superhighway, and the streets were by far the unmuddiest part of the site, and the street then, there was a conflict because, of course, children playing in streets and automobiles is the first conflict, but the other conflict became of turf. No one owned that part of the land. No one controlled that part of the land. And we could stand in the window there and just watch it going on, and how one group would take over from the next group, and how they showed their order of pecking. And so from that we said, well, what can we do about breaking this up into parcels that would give individual identity as opposed to this massive unit of Pruitt-Igoe? One of the things we came up with, and I must retract a little, go back, when Secretary Romney at the time spoke to us about, well, whatever you do, you cannot tear all the buildings down. And that was number one. The government had investment there and it was not paying off and that sort of thing. So we could not tear all the buildings down. So what could we do? We looked at that and decided that of the most usable space of the towers were the nodes and the end nodes that we named twin towers for no better than just to identify from anything else. Now the buildings were the long white areas you see on the left with the red color in the middle. Now our idea was to make those, so keep those areas as 11-story towers, but then on the other portions of that tower we would chop down or tear down completely, and then put around this area individual townhouses that would define spaces, that would give an identity to turf, that smaller kids could play near the house, larger kids could be out in the area, and of course the teenagers would be on the larger fields that were around. On the right is just how one could cluster these things in such a way that we could use masonettes in these buildings we chop down, say 6 stories, chop it down to 4 or 5 stories, where you could have 2-story masonettes. And with the debris, we had planned to put berms around the building to even change the landscape. So this in model form, you may be able to see a little. The twin towers, the higher part that you show on the left, the longer portions at either end, of course, were the parts that were cut down. On top could be these areas of gardens and things as well, not only the daycare centers, that sort of thing. Supervised things could be on the roofs of some of these things, as well as each person in the smaller house had a little turf that he could call its own. Now these in turn not to bore you with this, but most of this we had to see what you could do with these twin towers, with the stair regulations, the fire regulations, the elevators and that sort of thing, and how many apartments you could. Now this became a real jockeying for numbers, because what we were trying to do is not house 2,800 families, but trying to house 1,600 families, because this was the need that we could see from our market studies, from all of our analysis, from our growth projections, and that sort of thing. Again, these are the building types that we went through, even down to the point where what the townhouses would be and where they would be located in relationship to the site. Now again, just to give you this idea of what we went through to try to find out what does it cost to rehabilitate a building. Well, we know that it's cheaper to rehabilitate a building that someone's lived in than to do one that has been vacant for 5 years. So the whole thing of trying to make this feasible, our real aim was to get a house to a person that he could purchase from $8,000 to $12,000. Now, all of this meant that the government would have to do certain things. And one thing was to clear the land or tear down that portion of the land to give to a developer or sell to the developer for $1 or whatever the case. So the developer would not have to absorb that in his cost, so that tenants of PI could, of course, afford to buy the house. Now, these houses are no cheaper built than the ones you saw in Leclede, but the people at Leclede, through various means, of paying for that homey situation that they have. And what we were trying to do here is to show that you can do the same thing, but not with that kind of false idea that what makes a house are pretty little shutters. And again, all of these costs, as they were related to the 11 stories, to the 5 stories, to the townhouses, until we get down to economic control model A. Now, the darker buildings are the twin towers that we kept of the original buildings. Now, if you remember that shadow line that you saw of the buildings from the very beginning, you can begin to see that now these towers begin to read as points and not as slabs of buildings with tiny spaces in between. Even though the spaces were quite generous between, they had a tendency to look much smaller because they ended up being a corridor. Now, you can understand why that was done originally, because it's easier to build over unoccupied land, or that is to say, without overbuilding utilities and things that were already in a street grid pattern in this particular area of the city. Again, these were showing that you could do one thing or you could do the other, and all of these things ended up in sizable areas that you could start off with, say, fixing 300 units, 400 units, 800 units, or 1,600 units. Again, this is one of the economic models. So it all ends up into the new redeveloped Pruitt-Igoe, as you see on the right, the development plan that we were trying to shoot for. Now, everyone said, at least the doubting Thomases always said, that you can't get people to move back into Pruitt-Igoe. It's got a stigma and what have you. Well, on the left, you can see by these different colors, it might be too difficult to read, but that was a breakdown. Again, that no family living in Pruitt-Igoe was put out. At least there was new housing available for him through rent supplement or some of the federal programs, what have you. So, again, one of our charges to start off with, first, change the image of Pruitt-Igoe. Second, those 600 families or 700 families that were living there had to be rehoused in whatever it was you came up with. And third, that you could not tear down all the buildings. So some model shots just to kind of show, to break up this linear. If you notice, the grid pattern is still there. We couldn't do anything better either, and overbuilding sewers and things. You cannot stop the working of the city by doing something else. The grid pattern on the left is still going across the screen and up and down the screen, but it's done in such a way that you'd hardly recognize it anymore. Again, I've given you the idea of what the Twin Tower is, what the cut down portion was, and we ended up not cutting down over half of those buildings. 50% we got them to agree to, that maybe we could tear down 50% and redo the apartments inside and add these low-rise townhouse units around. On the left, it's given you an idea of what a Twin Tower looks like with the low buildings around, with this definition of turf. We were able to talk, one of the problems was, well, how can you do this? And we said, well, let's explore new ways of demolishing buildings, or portions of the buildings we don't want. Now, of course, this brought up a lot of question about, how do you do it? By conventional means, it would cost us, say, $1.50 to tear down the building. By this explosive method that we employed, it would cost 25 cents. So you can see the difference that the government is saving, and that this money does not have to go back into what the new resident would have to pay to be able to live at Pruitt-Igoe, and consequently we were trying all of these things again to get a new house for a new person, a family, that would range from $8,000 to $12,000. Now, on the right was the preparation of one of the buildings for explosives. And again, to show you how, one of the things was how can we totally demolish a building? Another problem was how could we separate some of the buildings? They were very long. We wanted to separate, take out portions of it. And the other was what happens when it's left. Now, it's very difficult to see this on slides, but the film will depict that very well, this whole process that we went through of preparing the building and the demolition, the destruction of it itself, the demolition of it itself. So all of these things worked. You could chop up a building. You see the one there, those were living rooms against that wall. You can see that you can separate the building and destroy this part of the building, or demolish this part of the building without disturbing the remainder. And as you see the arch in the background on the left, this pile of rubble there was one of the buildings that was totally demolished. And at this particular area, once you ran the bulldozer over it again, these people are standing on that berm that you see there that we suggested would be planted and landscaped, and of course changes the image of just the shotgun routes through Pruitt-Igoe. Now, what to do with that particular area? And of course the government said, well, what are you going to do with it? And we said, well, we had suggested doing these tests in some remote area on the site. They suggested doing it in the middle to show that some effort was being made, and that for $65,000 they'd be able to make a new park on that area. All right, we were not interested in putting a park in the middle, but we were interested in making this test. So, again, the government reneged on their part of the proposition. Now again, you can see on the left the building that has been cut. Portions of the building has been cut down. And what you have remaining, there's a twin tower. As you see, a twin tower on the right, and the low buildings being added. And this street coming around, by changing the direction of the streets on this low area, you can see this is the same view of what we'd be looking at from the reality to what was planned. And again, some of the areas that we say we'd cut down, lower the building. And you can begin to see even the architectural proportions of the building still has some clarity about it. The living rooms with the large windows, the bedrooms with the small ones. And you can see there that it still kind of carried a character through. Now, this 5-story is like the 5-story at the end of this model. It goes back and it's connected to a twin tower at the end. And more shots of the model to give this idea. And again, we started out with one thing, we ended up with the other. And the emphasis we thought was the best suited for the residents of Pruitt-Igoe, those existing tenants that were there, plus the new market that we could prove to the government was feasible. Now, of course, the film is silent. And I think we can, if there's some questions, again, maybe we'll run through this right quick and try to keep it in mind and we can talk about it afterwards. This was the design team. Kind of picture of the existing situation, some occupied spaces. Now again, you can see this long avenue of muddy street or muddy playground between buildings. This was an occupied building instead. The surrounding community. Now the taller buildings you see are downtown Detroit, St. Louis, so you can see that you're not very far from that. In fact, it's incredibly close. And of course, Saturn and Sarge. The symbol of the new St. Louis. We learned quite a few lessons at Pruitt-Igoe, our experience there, and I think we all came out for the better. That includes Walter Netsch and Bob Hutchins and Charlie Dusker and David Sharp. It's an unoccupied building, and you can kind of see the kind of vandalism or the disrepair that they fall into very rapidly once you close it. You can see that there was an original overbuilding of public housing. Some of those accidents were actually lives lost. This is a kind of tour around the site. That's St. Bridget's again, and that's the Virgin that's been spruced up. There is an older building, unoccupied buildings. Coming up isn't occupied. The only way you can tell the difference is glass is still in the windows. some of the community services, that you expect to have. And there wasn't a supermarket within a mile's distance of Pruitt-Igoe. And the supermarket chain says, well, we get ripped off, This is their whole commercial strip across the street. Of course, liquor store. But notice how everything is barred. Now you're looking just a block away. In the near background is a school, the one with Then behind it is Pruitt-Igoe. Now this area was cleared around Pruitt-Igoe something like 12, 15 years ago. And again, if you look at the Pruitt-Igoe buildings from a distance, they really look like a fine example of urban architecture. I disagree with the idea that you can't do architecture for public housing recipients. They had these pass-throughs, you could get through the building without any interruption. The spaces were, of course, FHA minimums, or urban housing minimums, public housing minimums. And here you see a lot of playgrounds around the areas, but none of them occupied. And up comes, horseshoe pitching, not just the regular kinds of things in playgrounds, but every time there was a problem, they'd stick something new in, and this something new is really not the answer. We're coming up now to, this is Sunday afternoon, and you see no one's around. No one comes out anymore. And there are 3 kids out here playing, and kind of fascinating, again, the order of pecking that you can notice. Four kids, sorry. Now watch the little one hit the big one. Now watch the other big one come over and murder the little one. And then the other big one takes off after the other little one. Now this was just a happy play. Time would not allow me to tell you the heartaches and the pain we went through to just try to convince, first of all, the task force that there was something to be done. And then our trips to Washington, talking to the head people, all these different secretaries and undersecretaries, and how everyone showed, quote, interest, but in the end decided to do nothing. And I guess you all heard now that the idea is to actually tear down Pruitt-Igoe. The plan is. It seems a shame. And they hired very famous playground experts to put things out there, and notice that no one's using it. This is in between occupied buildings, you see. They had one of their what they call upgrading or modification programs. It essentially ended up putting Lexan in these crossover corridors. You see the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, and the 10th floors. Those bands of windows with no light behind. Lexan, is this. Lexan, is this marble invention that can't break inside some of the units. They're unoccupied units. And you see, it doesn't take very long for a well-built building to go to pot if it's not occupied. teenagers were very helpful to us. We opened shop and told everyone living there that you can stop in anytime you want to, and we explained what we were trying to do. And of course, there was little apprehension because first night we were there, they says, we've been studied to death, we're tired of it. When you're going to do something, you're just like all the other people coming around here studying us. And actually, people began to come to the Monday morning meetings and would actually sit and wait. And of course, what was feared that we'd be shot at or molested, whatever the case may be, was not the case at all. In fact, we never had any apprehension, but and somehow, I personally feel that they've been let down again, lieutenants at Pruitt-Igoe. Some of the pastime or some of the older members of the community just stay in there. And of course, kids everywhere are the same. They were very playful. Now here's new playground equipment with an Ulster sitting out there sunning, but no kids use them. Of course, it's failed to say that there's about 6 inches of mud all around it. You notice the guy gave the power to the people, then peace. It's an occupied building. That's a community center where we had an office, the building on the right, there's a little building. So it wasn't, they had a branch library there, they had 2 elementary schools, there was a Catholic school, 2 large, well-established churches, and so one couldn't say that they didn't have, there was a community center with swimming pool and all, but again, these things just don't work if you put them there without any idea or feeling about the people that are using it. Now we're coming to the demolition phase, and to show how you could demolish parts of the building without destroying the other. Went in to start off with and separated the building. This was done by jackhammers and carburetor saws and various means. And there was a torch that they had developed with burning oxygen that would cut through concrete and steel and everything like that. You almost get a razor cut from it. And then, again, preparing the idea of the demolition is not to, I don't know what I had expected or what most people would expect demolition. What it is that actually the lower underpinning is charged and blown from under the building, and gravity takes over, and it's the gravity that causes all of this crushing down to the ground. So on the columns that supported the building at first floor level, holes were drilled into them and the charges were placed. And the demolition experts can tilt the building one way or the other or cause it to fall in on themselves just by these milliseconds of a difference in the charge time. One does something, the other tilts it, the next one pressures it, and as it goes down, as you'll see. Very economical way to, here we go. See, now watch this slow movement, see. Now they're making this building pull in. See, now it all falls within on itself. The guy told us we wouldn't have any debris 20 feet from the building. Of course, we didn't believe that. But actually, look at that. And this rubble, is good compactable rubble. All of it is, good concrete and brick. We even studied the possibilities of saving some of the brick to see what would happen if you could really keep some of it. Now see, the charge is down, and notice how the building shifts so it won't hit the building on the side there. But once you tear it down, what do you see behind it? Another monster the same way. So here again, you'll see, once this building is down and the dust clears, you see the same thing practically. All it does is exposes another row of those buildings. Of course, we had helicopters flying around the St. Louis Police Department, and of course, the local demolition people didn't like the idea so much because it meant that you're taking away their jobs. But I think we have to think about new ways of doing things, because if we don't, we'll get stuck in this same thing again that Yamasaki was faced with. He wanted to put more elevators in the building. He wanted to not have these buildings tight together, but he was given a program. And everyone's talking about the dollar and how much it costs to do this, just as we were concerned with. How can you get housing for someone who's making $5,000 or $6,000 a year? No mortgage banker is going to allow you to buy anything that's your income. So I think we have to develop new means and new methods that will respond to the needs of people in the inner city, and not so much this idea that the American dream is this little cottage out in the suburbs with little shutters on it. I think that's a false kind of idea, and of course the people at Pruitt-Igoe want it, just like the people moving to the suburbs want it. But they cannot move to the suburbs. They cannot have it. They end up with this. And to say that a project that is not 15 years old and you have to do this to it to make it livable for people to live in is kind of ironic. And these days when we can put men on the moon, we can't solve a little housing problem. A little housing problem. And it's little compared to the amounts of money that we put into space exploration. Now, the bulldozer runs over this several times and crushes these larger pieces, and it becomes a mound, or a berm, that one can sod. The idea of keeping that debris on site and making these landforms, as opposed to carting it away, using it for landfill someplace, saves money also. Now, what's left of those buildings are reusable. And in those in the taller buildings, the plan was for housing for the elderly, which you have to have elevators, whether it's 2 stories or 3 stories. The moment it's over 1 story, and housing for the elderly, you have to have. Now this is the last building, and I think, notice the arch in the background, and notice that all of downtown St. Louis is this close to this valuable property. Now, we tried to find some means. What else can you use these buildings for? The ceilings are too low for hospitals or office buildings. Someone says use them for a school. Well, you don't have the proper corridors and things like that. Plus, there are schools that have vacant classrooms in the building there again. Notice the arch, almost like Cecil B. DeMille. Couldn't have planned it any better. All of this dust from the cement and bricks all kind of disappeared within 5 minutes' time. And notice what reappears first. Oh, they cut that part out. Now, as Clotilde Smith's development about a mile away, the clean town, the idea that you have commercial areas, the little red things in commercial areas spread out to the side. This is just the kind of neighborhood thing you need. Barber shop, beauty shop. This was, of course, a regional shopping center down at the south end of the site, a large red area. But the little cleaners, the little laundromats and things are all dispersed within the community itself. itself, within the builders themselves. And of course, the first question one would ask is, why wasn't something like that done to start off with? But you see that the government has all of these funny, strange regulations, that on government property you can't have a commercial, you can't have a profit-making organization selling goods or whatever you have. And we even got them to relent on that sort of thing, at least for this as a pilot project. And of course, Romney was more interested, or as interested in this as he was our outcome, because he wanted us to be able to put down our process and our guidelines that someone could at least look at other problem areas in public housing the country over. And of course, immediately we found out that that sounds like that's a nice thing to do. What goes wrong here, you can put it there, but that's not the case. There's a different set of problems with every one of these communities that have been built around or are made up of these large housing project complexes. You don't find nearly the problem as you do, even though some of them are very dense. But if they're small and unit, that people can get to know one another, as well as that someone can define his own little turf. This belongs to me, I can defend this, and you respect mine and I respect yours. But where there's a common corridor that everybody in the building has to pass by your front door, somebody's going to knock on your door, and pretty soon you're going to say, well, the kids see that you don't like people knocking on your door and making noise outside your window, so pretty soon you're going to be doing something to him, and the kids are going to be doing something to you, and first thing you know, you have a real conflict on your hands. So one of our problems was to remove these areas of conflict, to have people stepping on one another's toes the least amount. And it becomes a very serious problem. If you're on the elevator and the same guy gets in every day and steps on your foot, pretty soon you're going to say he's doing it on purpose, and the next time he does it, whop, you hit him beside the head. And all of these things, you can expand them, they seem to be minor. We ran into one family that had not for 11 years left the apartment. Someone would bring their mail up or shop from it, but they had not left their apartment for 11 years. Can you imagine that? There was, of course, the housing for the elderly. Now, because there are no apartments on the ground floor, some of the elderly that are lame would have to live in the building on the second floor above. Well, with the elevator stop, that only stops at the ground floor and on number 4 and on number 7 and on number 10. That's if you get off an elevator and you walk up or down the floor to get to. This saves the number of elevators you have to have, the number of stops, the time it takes you to get up and down. Well, there was a lame lady that lived, if they'd had a first floor to live in, they would have put her there, but she had to live on the second floor or the third floor, but not on the fourth floor, because the fourth floor, again, was the one that was used for the crossover, right? So she had to live on the second and third floor. They put her down as low, but she had to crawl up the steps to get to her apartment because no elevator stopped on her floor. Now, of course, Yamasaki could have solved that problem if it were given to him. We're going to have infirmed people living here. We're going to have ambulatory cases that you have to provide for their getting in and out of the building. Now, he could have solved that. You could have solved that. But then that lady had no business living at Pruitt-Igoe. In fact, they should have had her at one of the public housing where she could just roll her wheelchair right into her front door or back door, or whatever the case might have been. Again, shots of the model, just trying to give the idea that this whole image of Pruitt-Igoe, as you remember from the very beginning, the shadows, has been changed. We've provided housing for 1,600 plus people, families. We have utilized about 50% of the building, that was there with the high-rise and the low areas that we kept. We were able to give tenants a kind of turf that they could use for themselves we were able to get the price down, that a family earning $5,000, $6,000, $8,000 a year could actually own a home. And I think no one argues the point that if someone owns the property, they take much better care of it than if they're renting. And of course, if you own it and something goes wrong, you try very hard to fix it. Whereas if you're living in someone else's house, you're trying to get the owner to come out to make the repairs, whatever the case may be. And it's no different when public housing authorities are the lessees, and you're the tenant, whether it's one-to-one basis or whether it's the public housing authority to the basis of 200, 2,800 people on Pruitt-Igoe. Hello. Well, I don't think I was that explicit. Is there no question? Any comment? I'm sorry. They are, at least, they said that they're going to start a relocation program to relocate these tenants that are remaining in Pruitt-Igoe to other public housing or rent supplement housing in the area. And I would say in the area, which I think is bad to start with. You saw the area. Well, actually, the Undersecretary of HUD has informed us that our plan was good and it was reasonable, but they are going to tear down Pruitt-Igoe. That was as of 2 weeks ago. Yeah, they were over our shoulders. Yeah, we worked with Elmer Smith, who was the regional director of HUD. We worked with two of his underlings, I forget what their titles were. We worked with the City of St. Louis Planning Department, and of course the Public Housing Authority, and the political arm, of course, was the mayor's office with his executive secretary as being chairman of the task force. Right. Yes, it was submittal too, because before we could, every Monday morning we'd have to go in with, this is what we've done, this is what we want to do, and they have to say, well, go ahead and do it, or wait, we'll have to talk with someone to see. There was a real communication there. It wasn't that we reported to them after it was all over. They knew step by step what we were going to do and how much it was going to cost, because they, I don't know, I guess they felt that big firm like SOM was out to do the men or rob them. And of course, we haven't received all of our payment for the job anyway. So, we did not accept that job for the purpose of making money or fame or fortune. The very reason that you don't find a lot of, quote, qualified architects doing the kind of work now in public housing is because it's not rewarded. It's really not rewarded. No, the Public Housing Authority in practically every city, has a budget, and their budgets are determined pretty much of what's spendable, what the monies that are available. And the maintenance at Pruitt-Igoe, of course, is more than it would be at a stable public housing community. And naturally, this was drawing off, a lot from the remaining public housing units, just to keep Pruitt-Igoe going. And I'm sure this is why the director of public housing